Christ, oh God. I think that Trump is in on it, and I think he's inoculated because he seems to not have a problem being exposed to people who are infected without wanting to test. And he's a germaphobe. To me, that's strong evidence that something is askew there. Doesn't mean necessarily there's something there, but it's suspicious. We'll add it to a few other questionable things. They've been very actively blocking United States residents from testing. Very actively. Everything they do is to block it in some way. It's a, look over here. It's a distraction or a lie or, whatever they have to do to pacify the media at the very moment that they're being attacked. And they do it by lying. It'll be out. We got 1 million. It's already ready. We got 1 million. Everybody gets tested when they ask. All bullshit. Still, months in, less than 20,000 tests for a country vastly larger than Korea, but Korea tests 20,000 per day. Something wrong with that picture. I don't care how efficient and lucky South Korea is. There's just no way that we could not have done the same thing, let alone get the same number of tests in months. That's just intentional. It has to be intentional. There's no such thing as anything that criminally negligent. It's intentional. John Bolton has been deeply involved in all things horrible. Wanted to nuke North Korea, first strike. There hasn't been a war that he hasn't wanted to not only get into, but help start. In Iraq, he lied about evidence, and he acquired fake signatures from, I forget where it was in Africa, the uranium, yellow cake uranium that they claimed Saddam was buying in Africa. That was a lie, and that was Bolton's baby. Bolton helped to get George W. Bush into office in 2000 by stopping recounts, because those recounts would have shown Gore won, and he did win. He would have won if they would have recounted, but they successfully stopped that, and Gore ended up conceding. There were election machines that were tampered with during that election. There was gerrymandering. There were all these little tricks to get George W. Bush into office. And even then it was really close. So they had to pull out the heavy hitters like John Bolton to stop the recount from happening. Even the dangling chads didn't fly enough. That was one of their dirty tricks, is the dangling chads. They were saying that, those aren't punched out because they're still attached to the card, because they were not cut completely with the puncher. So that was a big scandal. But nobody ever talked about John Bolton's role in all that, or anything else aside from the stuff that he was trying to do under Trump. But just because he got fired from under Trump doesn't mean that he doesn't have pretty much the same influence. He just can't pull the trigger. But he's got enough influence to have done this bio attack by himself, probably. I don't think he did, but I think he has that much pull. So John Bolton was the co-founder of the Project for the New American Century, which is a Washington think tank. If anybody listens to me regularly or listens to the people I listen to, they know exactly who I'm talking about. this think tank, in my opinion, were responsible for planning and executing 9/11. If they weren't, that's what they wanted to happen. They were just waiting. They knew that a, quote, they put this in their documents, a new Pearl Harbor would be required to galvanize the public into increasing the military substantially, because their whole plan was to go into the Middle East and destroy it, turn it upside down, as General Wesley Clark said. Make it under our control.
This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld, and you could name a half dozen other collaborators on the Project for a New American Century. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control.
Well, they couldn't do that with a smaller budget. And so before 9/11 happened, they were all ready to go with these plans to invade the Middle East. So they just needed an excuse. They needed a new Pearl Harbor, and they got it. Surprise, surprise. Who would have thought that could happen? What great luck. So that's a little bit suspicious. Where Dick Cheney and where Rumsfeld were and where Bush wasn't quite as shady, but the role that Rumsfeld and Cheney played in 9/11 were more than a little bit suspicious, because they were in places to facilitate it. And the Secretary of Transportation went on stand and said that Dick Cheney knew that that jet was coming into the Pentagon, and he told them to stand down for shooting it down. He was asked, "Are you sure you want to stand down?" And he said, "Did I say anything different?"
Had that order given, I think it was by the president, that authorized the shooting down of commercial aircraft that were suspected to be controlled by terrorists. Were you there when that order was given?
No, I was not. I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon. There was a young man who would come in and say to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the vice president, "Do the orders still stand?" And the vice president turned and whipped his neck around and said, "Of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?" Well, at the time, I didn't know what all that meant. And
the flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
So they allowed that jet to hit the Pentagon. Why would they do that? Yet it was done. And the people that were searching for the $2.3 trillion missing from the Pentagon just happened to be investigating and going through paperwork, etc., right there in the Pentagon. So all the evidence and them died in that attack. I'm not sure every single one of them died, but most of them. It was just, oh, what another coincidence. We'll never know how much, what happened to that money.
Auditors say the department cannot account for $2.3 trillion in transactions in 1 year alone.
It is, I was going to say terrifying. It is such a monumental task.
All the evidence is gone now. We'll never know. What a crazy coincidence. It's just, and it goes on and on and on with other players too. Lucky Larry Silverstein owning the Twin Towers. You can go on about it, but it had a lot of different purposes. It served a lot of different purposes, one of which was the Patriot Act. which gave the president sweeping powers. And they also said, oh, we have to go get those terrorists. So we have a war on terror. So anywhere that we say are terrorists, we can go into that country and root them out. So anywhere we go, and we did this a lot, we would say that there are terrorists in that country because we want into that country. We want their resources. We want the strategic geolocation, or we want to overthrow the leadership so that we can put in our own pipelines and make our corporations happy. It goes on and on. All of that is true. And there's a whole industry around it that got rich from World War. And Dick Cheney was one of them, working for, or making the contract for Halliburton without any bids for it. And then suddenly going after a $200 million paycheck for doing that. He went on to vice president, I think, for them. And he was immune to anything from it. Was just like, come on. You know, I mean, all of these things happened that they wanted to happen. And I don't think that it's a coincidence. And if you hear General Wesley Clark talk about it, it sounds like he knows, but he doesn't let on completely. But he knows that they went to destroy the Middle East, that was their plan all along. And he talked about it, hearing about that via memo in the Pentagon shortly after 9/11, that we were going to invade Iraq. There was already a choice made.
This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
In 2001. We invaded Iraq in 2003. So we lied, and lied more. You know, we manufactured reasons to go in after Iraq. There was no oops. No, not an accident. It was pre-planned. Plenty of witnesses to that fact. I don't think anybody even denies it anymore. But nobody gets investigated still. There needs to be a reinvestigation. And I have hopes that someday they'll be held accountable for what they've done. Because it's not just 9/11. It's the entire Middle East. It's the betrayal of American trust. It's neocon coup d'etat, policy coup d'etat, as General Wesley Clark says, that the guys from the Project for the New American Century have a policy coup d'etat in the Pentagon.
What happened in 9/11 is we didn't have a strategy, we didn't have bipartisan agreement, we didn't have American understanding of it, and we had instead a policy coup in this country. A coup. A policy coup. Some hard-nosed people took over the direction of American policy.
Nobody got to vote on what they're doing, and it continues to right now. And it goes on. Got that bling, bling, bling. Bling.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by the go, you know this, you know the thing. 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 You know.
This day should be an inspiration to every American. Because thanks to your leadership from early on, throughout this process, Mr. President, you put the health of America first. Mr. President, you have forged a seamless partnership, but it's all a result of you tasking us with bringing together. And together, as you've said many times, together we'll get through this.
He pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office that says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. 7 countries in 5 years.